Hi CG Cookie Crew, it's Spikey. We are going to facing a task where we have to hand paint a lot of things. I will show something I've made, which makes things a bit easier, because let's take the wood. We have a wooden floor here. I made a wooden floor and I use one texture, this one. But of course, because it's UV'd and it's hand paint, every single piece of wood has exactly the same image, same structure. So I've made a group, a global UV group, which does this. Everyone is different now, and you can see if I move one, it changes its structure. So the position of each board decides how it uses the UVs, which is of course brilliant. If you have to make a few chairs, you unwrap them, use one paint texture, one wood texture, and everyone is different. Doors, wooden doors, just use one texture. I could also, for instance, vary the scale. Instead of doing this with one scale, I can add an input geometry node or an object info, which has a random, and then the shift A. There's a map range node. The random gives a value from 0 to 1, and then we want to have the scale like, say, go from 5 to 11, and then add a converter, combine XYZ, plug this in, for instance, the X or the X to the Y, make them different, and we get even more variation. Very simple. So how does this work? And how do you paint a seamless texture? Well, I'll show you. New. Don't save this, I know how it goes. We delete the default cube this time. Add in a plane. I'll show the texture painting first. How to paint a seamless texture. Actually, let's go to the image editor first. I can make a shader editor here. Make a new texture. I would suggest a higher resolution, but it's just for demo. And here I'm going into edit mode. I'm going to subdivide this twice. And now, if I go into the UV editor, I select everything and scale this by 3. Then we can go into texture paint mode. We have to make material here. So this thing, Ctrl T, and use our texture untitled. Right? I will also go into the viewport display and enable the wireframe. Not necessary, but it's easier. And now I can paint. Look what's happening now. I'm getting a seamless texture automatically. Beautiful. When you're happy, you can just go back to object mode. We can actually delete the plane, adding a new one. Scale this. Let's scale it on the X, for instance. Make it like this. Wooden board. There's you. And project from view. And ready. We use our material here. And we should actually see our texture now. It's probably scaled wrong. Yeah. Something like this. Or, well. But then it's starting to repeat and that's not what we want, so why don't you do what I want you to do? Right. Oh, this is basically how you make your seamless texture. But now comes the trick. I have a group, global UV, and I'm going to plug in my global UV coordinates. And now it changes with the position. Of course, I can now get Shift A, add in or Shift B is on the X. Putting it down a bit. The X. Something like this. And then Shift R. Selecting them, Shift D, Y, up, something I want them, and Shift R. And we have our beautiful flower with all the different floorboards. So I can make this a solidify and maybe a bevel. So much 0.1. And I am actually going to select all of them, hitting Control R, copy modifiers. Right. Make them thicker. Anyway, this is simple enough, but now we want to see what's actually happening here. So let's look at this group. What basically happens is I take the UV map, the UV coordinates, and the location, and I add them. In this case I subtract them, but could be add, that doesn't matter. What is happening here with the vector rotate is that sometimes I rotate it around the z-axis by 180 degrees, which is pi. You know the angle they give when you have a node like this, it says degrees, but when you put something, plug a value in it, it goes in radians, so you have to take pi. Pi is 180 degrees, so I take x plus y, doesn't matter, I can take any values, I just x plus y, I round this to get an integer, and then multiply this by pi, so I get 0, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, etc., etc., depending on the sum of the x and y coordinates of the location. And like I said, I could take anything. I could take the z-axis or whatever. So that's this rotation part. The whole top is done. Now let's look at the bottom. I take location, I take the x and z location. I took first, I want to use the z location also because otherwise if you move it in the z direction nothing changes and it only uses the x and y, so I use the z. And because I want it to not to change fast in the z direction, I multiply it by 7, so 7 times the z plus the x. If you don't do that and you move it exactly in 45 degrees upwards, then the texture doesn't change, so that's why I multiply here by z times 7. And here I add the y and z. This one goes in the x and this one goes in y. I scale it again to have the texture change faster. It's not really important. Then I subtract one from another and I put it out. It's actually quite simple. So basically it's the UV coordinates minus the location or plus the location, whatever you want. The rest is very simple. Okay, anything else? Well, of course, this is just black and white, so you can make this a little bit more interesting. Color mix RGB into the vector. Remember, this is black and white, so I can put the color into the vector. It doesn't matter because it's black and white values. Brown. Either, oh, but not. Oh, it's not so saturated. More like this. Make it a little bit darker. I mean, you can already have different colors in your texture, of course, and then it'll be easier. But well, doesn't matter. Maybe more yellow, but not that much. But you have a black and white value, which you of course can use for the roughness, and you can also use it in vector bump. Put it in height, and I want to reduce this immediately because otherwise it's really ugly. Especially with Eevee. You can see my computer ain't very fast. Then you want to use probably a map range here to get from 0.4 to 0.9 maybe. Eevee doesn't seem to update that. And in the cycles we need a environment texture. HDRI. This is an interior HDRI. Let's give it some time. Of course, this is not very interesting, so what we want, maybe a bit to make it look more like wood, something like this. There's all sorts of things you can do, but the main node is this global UV, and if you want I can actually provide a blend file with the global UV so you can link it in, but that's basically it. And important is how to paint your seamless texture, because hand painted textures are usually not seamless. That's what I wanted to show you actually. So thanks for watching. Bye.